I'm not sure the last time you heard the name Tim Donaghy. I was listening to the podcast Whistleblower, and it just brought back all these memories because Donaghy used to try to call in, and he would reach out to Paulie, and he wanted to come on the show. He wanted to give us his side of things, and he was labeled that rogue NBA official by David Stern. You know, was he betting on games? Did he fix games? Did he have a partner, Scott Foster, NBA official, their relationship, the number of phone calls back and forth with one another? And you can go back in the early 2000s, and there are cities, franchises that still swear Tim Donaghy robbed them of wins and maybe championships. The aforementioned Tim Livingston is the sports journalist, creator, and host of Whistleblower Podcast, and he joins us on the program. Tim, thanks for joining us. Let me start with just the idea to take another dive into Tim Donaghy and what exactly happened here with the NBA.
Yeah, well, I think you can break it up. The way we've done it is there's the scandal, there's Tim Donaghy, there's what he was doing on the court, there's the billions or at least hundreds of millions, potentially billions of dollars that were moving in the gambling community just based off of Tim Donaghy's games. There's that scandal, and there's the conspiracy. There's what was the NBA doing during this time? Was the NBA also manipulating games? Were there other referees involved? How big was this? So we investigate both sides in the scandal and try and just find answers to both.
Okay, what is more intriguing as far as the NBA side or Tim Donaghy's side?
The conspiracy by far. It's fascinating because what David Stern was able to do in 2007 after this came out was silence it pretty quickly, right? I mean, he actually, I think we proved pretty conclusively that the NBA actually leaks news of the Donaghy scandal. And they did so because they knew the FBI was investigating the scandal. So we dive into this in the podcast, but the NBA brilliantly, I mean, who would think that the NBA would release the news of the biggest scandal in the league's history? But I think a lot of people, and myself included, believe that they did. And so that's kind of where it starts. And if you look at David Stern, who was such a brilliant leader in crises, whether or not he was ethical throughout, we can debate, but Stern's ability to make this scandal go away is really what this podcast is about, because in 2007, this could have really blown up. This could have been a really potentially just brand altering event for the NBA that could have, really brought them closer to WWF. And he, just through his brilliance and cunning.
Well, I thought what was great, the marketing ploy to say, he kept telling us it was a rogue official. It was a rogue official. It was never, just an official or Tim Donaghy. It was a rogue official. So he wanted, this was a standalone, one guy, nobody else. Is that true? Is Tim Donaghy the only guy who should be under investigation or was under investigation for betting on games?
Absolutely not. I mean, again, in my opinion, if you look at just everybody that we've interviewed over the course of the scandal, and there's so many people, Dan, as I'm sure you can imagine, that had a lot of interesting things to say, but wanted it kept off the record. I wish everybody, and hopefully after this podcast comes out and all this comes out, we can get people like Mark Cuban and other referees who can corroborate a lot of what Donaghy's saying on the record. But if you look at, we interviewed Michael Franzese, who's a former capo in the Colombo crime family, who says that he had two NBA referees who were not Tim Donaghy on his payroll, as well as NCAA referees. And if you look at the Mafia at that time, it seems like this was just commonplace. There was referees left and right who were using their whistles to influence basketball games. And Donaghy's relationship with Scott Foster is something that we need to investigate today in 2020.
Did you get a chance to talk to Scott Foster and explain the relationship with Tim and Scott Foster?
So Tim and Scott Foster entered the NBA the same year in 1994. They were best friends throughout their 13 years in the NBA. They, during the peak of the scandal, exchanged 134 phone calls in 5 months on the phone that the FBI said Donaghy was using for gambling-related purposes. And both of them, their excuse was kind of like, "Oh, we just called to shoot it, right?" And they were talking for 2 minutes at a time. So there's a lot of things that don't add up with their relationship.
Are they talking prior to games?
Yes.
Night of games?
Yes. And immediately after immediately after Donaghy would talk with his bookie or the middleman, Tommy Martino, he would often call Foster. So the phone records are highly suspicious. And yeah, I would love. I've not gotten a chance to talk with Scott Foster, but I would absolutely love to. And he's got a lot of questions to answer from this that he's never had to. And that was again part of just how the NBA brilliantly swept this under the rug and moved on. And there's a lot of people, the NBA, Scott Foster, Mark Cuban, that need to answer questions about this scandal.
How many games is Tim Donaghy accused of fixing?
So we know that Donaghy was betting on games that he refereed from 2003 to 2007. He refereed 260 games in that time frame, and I think all those games were compromised in some way or some form. I don't think he started betting on games and then took any games off. Took any games off. So 260 games over the course of 4 years that just Donaghy alone was betting. But what's fascinating is that Donaghy had no idea. He was betting with a couple of select people, but he had no idea how big this ballooned. By the end of it, the Gambino family, which is the biggest crime family in New York, or one of the biggest huge gambling syndicates throughout Philadelphia, New York, were cognizant that Donaghy was fixing games. And so more and more people became aware of the scheme, and more people started betting on Tim Donaghy games when they got word of which side he picked. And by the end of this thing, there was millions upon millions of dollars moving for each of Donaghy's games. And that last season, hundreds of millions were moving just on his games.
In the latest episode that comes out today, you talk with the FBI agent, Phil Scala, and you describe him as one of the most respected agents in the FBI's history and the agent who oversaw the investigation. What were some of the things that were revealed?
Oh, man, so much. So Phil Scala was generous enough to sit down with us. It took a while to convince him to do so. And I think the biggest revelation, so the NBA signed a $7.4 billion TV deal. And they signed it really what we found out, according to Scala, is that they signed it 5 days after learning from the FBI that the Donaghy scandal was coming down the pike. Now, $7.4 billion deals take months and months and months to negotiate. This wasn't like they just rushed it, that this just happened in 5 days and they just went to signature. They've been working on this deal for a long time, but it really raises some eyebrows that they might have rushed this deal to the finish line upon hearing about the Donaghy scandal coming down the pike. And that for me is something that, again, the NBA's never had to answer for. Scala says some fascinating things throughout, but
did ESPN and Turner know about the Donaghy investigation?
Turner, Sal Petruzzi, who I believe was their VP of communications at the time, said specifically that they did not know about the Donaghy allegations. And ESPN John Skipper, I believe, I'm not sure if he commented on the fact whether they knew or not, but it seems pretty clear that they did not inform their TV partners.
Do you think that gambling still exists with referees in the NBA today, Tim?
Well, that's a great question. That's what we need to get to the bottom of. And that's what we've gotten a little more transparency. We've gotten the 2-minute rule, or the 2-minute report, that the NBA gives us as fans, probably just to frustrate us even more. But we really need to vet referees a lot more than we currently do. We probably need them to open up their accounting, or their checkbooks, their bank accounts for forensic analysis. We need to really understand, because if referee X, some small time referee, his brother puts $5,000 on a game and he's going to kick the referee back, $5,000, $10,000 for fixing a game. We have no way to vet that. That could easily still be happening. And we have no idea. We have no real policing of the NBA's police. And that's a problem. And we've never really gotten there fully.
Who, if out of everybody you could interview, who do you want to interview?
I think Scott Foster would probably be number one. Cuban would be number two.
Has Foster said anything?
Foster, right after this came out back in 2007, 2008, said that he would love to talk more about it, and never really had to. But I would love to interview Foster, Cuban, and Dick Bavetta.
Now,
Dick Bavetta is another guy.
Why Cuban? You've mentioned him 3 or 4 times throughout this.
So Cuban, if you look at the 2006 finals, that's probably the most controversial NBA finals that's ever been played. And we present a lot of evidence that the referees did not like Mark Cuban. And so now we have to look at, okay, so the referees didn't like Mark Cuban. They didn't like him because he wanted the system, the refereeing system, to be overhauled. And it was going to cost them money and likely cost them, a lot of the perks that they become accustomed to. And Cuban's talked about referees throughout, right? But he's never really talked about this scandal. And he's never talked about how deep he thought it went. And I really want to talk with Mark about those things because I think he's got insight that the rest of us don't have. He's been in the weeds for 20 plus years. He's been the guy for the NBA that was shouting from the hilltops, there is a problem. And then this all has come out. And we've reached out to Mark. He's been very amenable via email, but he has has refused to come on, which is understandable. But yeah, I want to talk with Mark. But here's the thing, Dan. Mark Cuban, the Mavericks are valued, I believe, around $2 billion. And if this scandal would have erupted in a way that it could have in 2007, yeah, I mean, they might be worth $1.2 billion. And so if you're looking at Mark Cuban and the money involved, I understand why he's not talking to us, but I really would love to talk to him because I think his insight would be hugely valuable.
How many more episodes do you have?
We got one more. Today was episode 9. This episode's really the climax. This is what we've been building up to. Episode 10 is an epilogue where we reflect and we really, the question you just asked is huge. Where are we today? Has the system gotten better? How do we make it better? How do we as fans really believe in the integrity in the NBA and in the integrity of these basketball games going forward? That's what, if there's anything that could come out of this podcast, and if Adam Silver ever listens to this, I think we as fans we want that integrity. That's such a big word in the NBA. And I really hope that people in the NBA front office listen to this and make some much needed adjustments.
Haven't heard from Adam Silver, have you?
I've not. I would love to. I'd love to talk with Adam. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him and for his leadership and for what he's done for the NBA. And I think the last 6+ years under Adam Silver were a lot different than the previous 30 years in all the best ways.
Tim, good to talk to you, and congrats on the podcast. Good luck with that final episode next week.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
That's Tim Livingston, and it's the Whistleblower Podcast.